Welcome, everybody. My name is Izzy Fuqua. I'm the Adult Programs Coordinator for the VMFA. I get to work with wonderful people like Twyla Kitts, our Teacher Programs Educator for the VMFA, on offering this monthly gallery program. Just as a reminder, we do offer the program in person in the galleries on Tuesday mornings at 11, free, no tickets required. And then we offer it virtually for those who can't attend in person, again, 11 a.m. on Thursday. We have our next 3 months of gallery programs already online. So if you would like to see those, I'll drop that link in the chat and you can get registered or mark your calendar. Just a reminder of the format, Twyla will speak for approximately 20-ish minutes on roughly 3 works, although I think she'll do 6 because she is an overachiever. And then I'll come back on and join for Q&A. Okay, Twyla, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Izzy, and it's a pleasure to work with you as well. Izzy and I actually are neighbors. Her office is right next to mine, so we talk often. So welcome to an enlightening journey into the past, Rubens, Boilly, and Volaire, and I am indeed going to do, it's 3 pairs in 30 that I'm going to do today. So I'm really pretty excited about this. I don't know if any of you have actually been into the galleries, but I thought I would show you a little bit about how it's set up. So you would enter here into Heroes of the Baroque, and it really is, when you step into that chamber, like stepping into the past, as if you're going to take a journey through these wonderful, wonderful spaces that Dr. Sylvain Cordier has put together to give you a feeling of actually being in aristocratic environments in the 17th and 18th centuries. So we would go through Heroes of the Baroque, the Cabinet of Curiosity, political landscapes, theatrics of social life, a chinoiserie boudoir, the Grand Tour, and antiquity. So, and we are going to do a stop in Heroes, theatrics of social life, and antiquity revived. So we really kind of hit the spread, the arc of the story that this is telling. And originally, I think that Sylvain wanted to call it enfilade, which is a suite of rooms with doorways that line up that can often take you through the journey to meet whoever is in the aristocratic dwelling, but it's usually something that is most impressive, which I thought was great. But we decided that some American audiences might not know what enfilade means. So he didn't go with that for the final title, but it is in the intro paragraph. And it also is the serial newsletter for historians of 18th century art and architecture. So that seemed particularly appropriate, if you will. So the first area is God's heroes and people of the Baroque. But I do want to pause a moment and thank the Saunders for giving us this wonderful opportunity to show their collection. And I think one of the things that it has done is to enrich conversations with things that have been in our own collections for many, many years, but it's given us an opportunity to look at those in new ways. And indeed, it also sort of brings interest to that entire collection. It really makes lots of different interwoven connections that are rather like the stories of Ovid, who I will be mentioning soon. So Baroque is a stylistic movement in art and architecture that began in Rome in the early decades of the 17th century. It's derived probably from a Portuguese term meaning irregular pearl or stone, so that suggesting that the inherent beauty of these artworks resided in their unique and surprising qualities. That's from the label copy, but it was beautifully written, so I thought we should use that. So the exuberant brushwork, unconventional palettes, dramatic contrasts, abundant and intricately detailed ornamentation, and dynamic poses and movements. And I think we really see that in these 2 paintings here, which are in this part of the gallery. So the 2 that I'm going to concentrate on, though, are 2 by Peter Paul Rubens, The Abduction of Danera. And I think you can see that this is a centaur with a lady on his back, and she's sort of looking at him surprised, maybe something's happening there. This is an oil sketch for something that would have been executed in much greater finish later on, and it's really quite small. Both of these are quite small. So in the other one, and this is part of the Saunders collection, the other one is this one by Peter Paul Rubens, Palace in Arachne. And I thought sure that I had fixed the A in Arachne. Maybe I didn't hit save, but it does have an A in it, so pretend that I fixed it. So this is Peter Paul Rubens, Palace in Arachne. And again, this too was done for the decor of the King of Spain's Torre de la Parada. And here's a wonderful self-portrait by Peter Paul Rubens. And this is what the Torre de la Parada, or the Tower of the Parade, looks like. And probably this is around 1640. So this is probably what it looked like when these paintings were in there. Now, only the ruins remain. Most of this building was destroyed by fire during the War of Spanish Succession. But I just love kind of knowing what everything looked like, just the feeling of being immersed in the past. So Rubens was actually knighted by both Charles I and by Philip IV, who was the King of Spain, who made this order. And I thought this was really all the different, the ways that everything's kind of woven together, I find very interesting, because Anthony van Dyck, who did this portrait of Charles I, was actually a pupil of Rubens, one of his most accomplished, and he was great friends with Diego Velázquez, who painted this wonderful portrait of Philip IV. And Rubens is also an ambassador, a diplomat, just a true important man of his time that brought many people together. So I think that's kind of a wonderful story there. So now both of these paintings, as were many of the other 60 works that Philip IV commissioned from Rubens, the themes were taken from the Metamorphoses by Ovid. Ovid was a Roman poet. This was written around 8 AD. And from the Renaissance, all the way through the Baroque, and even to some extent into the Romantic period, many paintings are inspired by the stories of the Metamorphoses, which is, many of them begin with Greek legend, but also Roman legend. And the wonderful thing about this is that it really begins with the creation of the universe and takes you through this wonderful arc of storytelling to Ovid's own time. And often a story will begin, but then something will inspire a second story to begin before we come back and finish the first. And I think that that kind of weaving together is really interesting and would have made these paintings really popular for dinner conversations, for something to think about. Everyone would have been very familiar, everyone who was literate would have been very familiar with the Metamorphoses. So let's actually look at the Abduction of Danera by Nessus. So what is happening in this story is that Hercules has just recently married Danera, and they're going back to his native city. And they come to this great river with whirlpools and currents. And he's very worried. He knows that he himself can swim across or anything, but he's worried about Danera. Can he also successfully take her across the river? Well, as it happened, the centaur Nessus happened to be sort of the keeper of the fords there, and he offers to take Danera across on his back. Now, one of the things you need to know about centaurs is that since ancient Greek times, for the most part, they've been sort of symbols of unbridled lust, of emotions that are not held in check by reason. So when Nessus actually starts going across the river, and Hercules he's thrown his club across, he's thrown his bow across, and he swims across the river, and it has no trouble navigating the whirlpools. He's getting out of the river when he hears a cry from across the river, and Nessus has been overcome by his lust for Deianira, and he's starting to attack her. So immediately, Hercules pulls one of his arrows out of the quiver and pulls his bow back, and the arrow pierces Nessus's chest, and Nessus begins to die. Well, the arrow that Hercules used, the tip has been coated in the poison from the Hydra. So it poisons Nessus's blood also. So Nessus gives his cloak to Danera and tells her that it's an enchanted cloak and it will cause anyone to be completely faithful to the person they're promised to. So nothing happens right away, but many, many years go by, and rumor, who's a person in Ovid, kind of spreads these stories about Hercules's eye wandering to look at another young lady. And Danera finally decides that she will send the cloak to him so that he will remain faithful to her. When Hercules puts on the cloak, the Hydra poison sort of permeates his skin, and he feels like he's on fire, and he suffers so horribly that he actually builds a huge funeral pyre, climbs up on it, and burns his mortal remains to ashes. Nothing remains of him, but he is the son of Jove or Jupiter or Zeus, depending on which tradition you're looking at. And, you know, as a demigod, you know, something else should happen to him. So Zeus actually revives his immortal parts, invites him to Olympus, and puts him into the sky as a constellation. So there's sort of a nice ending here. And I think you can also see, if you see the line that's running down this, these are really quick sketches, but Rubens would actually do sort of a grid to make sure that he was getting them positioned just as he wanted. And then he would work on these very rapidly. But I think this is, you can very much see the Baroque style coming across in this piece. So next, let's look at Pallas in Arachne. Oh, that's where I fixed the A in Arachne. So you can see that there. So this story is about Pallas Athena, or Pallas Minerva in the Roman tradition, is the goddess of crafts, also of wisdom, but she's a great weaver. So is Arachne. In fact, Arachne is famed all over the area in which she lives for her expertise at weaving in these beautiful, beautiful tapestries. So Arachne, feeling very proud of her accomplishments, actually challenges Pallas to a contest. So each of them goes to the loom and begins to weave, and Pallas weaves all of these stories that in which mortal humans defy the gods and bring punishment on themselves. Arachne, on the other hand, does many, many images of the gods not behaving in an ethical or moral fashion. So by the time that they have both finished, Pallas is really examining the tapestry that's done by Arachne, trying to find some error, some mistake that she made, and it's perfect. So she flies into a rage and she begins to pummel Arachne with the spindle from the weaving apparatus. And eventually Arachne is so overcome that she hangs herself because she's so in such fear of Pallas. So Pallas eventually turns Arachne into a spider so that she continued to weave her silken webs forever. And that's actually obviously where we get the word arachnid from. So I think that's really interesting. But also, can you see back in the corner of the tapestry that's on the wall? It looks like a lady on the back of a bull. Well, that's sort of a quote that Rubens is giving us from this painting by Titian, The Rape of Europa, which he did a very famous copy of. So, and I just, all of these, they've mostly seen the same works of art, and it's very clever to do these references because the people looking at the art would probably find that really interesting as well. And not only do we see it in here, but I'm sure you are familiar with Las Meninas, the Diego Velázquez's masterpiece. And if you look back here on this wall, this is the Palace and Arachne painting that Rubens did, probably from a copy that Velázquez's son-in-law did. But I think that's really interesting that it keeps coming forward in time. And I just love the fact that Velázquez and Rubens were friends as well. So I only have 20 minutes, so we will move on to the theatrics of social life. But if you have not been to these galleries, please just come and walk through them if that's even all you do, because they're so beautiful, and the works in them, you won't be able to just walk through because they will stop you. They're so magnificent. So this is an area called the theatrics of social life. And this is an era when we're coming sort of to the end, and we're actually in the 18th century for the most part in this gallery. And we are sort of coming to the end of the reign of Louis XIV, who had a really, really long reign, so long that it was his great grandson who became king after him. And at the end of his reign, everything was sort of dark, and he had become very religious, and there wasn't much going on. So all of the young aristocrats were really ready for something different, for something amusing, for something to entertain them. And the theater was perfect for this. Well, one of the artists who kind of captured this was Louis-Léopold Boilly. And again, there is one image by him, this one, from the Saunders collection, and there's one in our permanent collection. And they sort of reveal one another. So Boilly, and I think this is the Electric Spark, which is the one in the collection of the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. And I think the next one we actually have, yes, I thought so. We actually have the preliminary drawing for that one, which is really interesting. And you can see many of the things that are also going on in this age of new ideas, the Enlightenment, and the scientific revolution. So you can see that this is set in an alchemist's studio, an alchemist's place. And it has this distillation apparatus, this wonderful oil lamp that's based on Roman designs discovered at Herculaneum. And we'll kind of look at some more things that were inspired by those ruins when we get to our last stop. But this is really interesting because this is not really from that same era. This is an electrostatic generator that in the actual painting you can see is hooked up to this Cupid, so that when this young lady touches the end of that arrow, she's going to get quite a shock. So, and this was sort of a something that they might have done in the salons. This was great entertainment. Here you can see the electrical boy that was done at parties and things all of the time. So playing around with electricity was something that was really going on quite a bit during this time frame. And here we have Louis-Léopold Boilly, and you can look at all of the time frames that he lived through. Born during the Ancien Regime, but he made it all the way through the July Monarchy. And the kind of paintings that he did changed dramatically as the condition, as the social setting changed, shall we say. And he also supposedly is the person who invented the term trompe-l'oeil. And there's some other paintings that are rather similar, or one other painting that's very similar to this in the actual exhibition. But I thought this was a great example of that gift that he gave to all. So one of the things that we thought about as we looked at these, and this is again Sylvain Corrier's magnificent eye for detail, he realized that the young lady has exactly the same dress on. So that we might wonder if this was part of a series, that he might have been telling a story about the romantic developments between these young people. So in the one on the left, the unburdened musician, she's crept into the room. It looks like he's been composing for hours, trying to bring his music together, and he's just exhausted. So she's trying to ease the manuscript away from him very, very gently. And perhaps, after that, they might have gone to experiment with electricity. But this until actually he began doing still lifes and genre scenes, but after he moved to Paris, he really began to do many paintings that sort of had an erotic undertone. And we actually have one of the prints of those that kind of shows that more. This is called Sweet Resistance. Probably not in very good shape, as you can see, but still I thought it was important to show, because Boilly also made much of his living by letting others do engravings or copies of his paintings, and then he would get a cut of the profits made from that, which not every artist had the business acumen to do. So that kind of set him apart from things. And the story is told that after his paintings were condemned for these suggestive scenes by the Committee of Public Safety, he produced The Triumph of Marat, which saved him from any further unfortunate consequences. And you can see Comparing Little Feet is another example of that sort of suggestive situation that he's going on with the ladies exposing their knees. And I also put A Story is Told, because there are many stories about this time frame that the people documenting the French Revolution that modern scholars have questioned. But I still think it's a wonderful way to underscore how his painting changed. After the revolution, he really began to do sort of scenes of Paris life, like this one, The Entrance to the Jardin Turc. And I chose this one because in the collection of the museum, we actually have a study for that. So I invite you to go back to the Saunders collection, have a look at these two, and think about maybe what story is going on. What are they telling us about in these two really wonderful works of art? So we're going to progress on to Antiquity Revived at the very end of this enfilade. And we're going to look at this one by Volaire, Roman Palace Burning. And this one, The Eruption of Vesuvius. And again, one from the Saunders collection and one from the Virginia Museum collection, which I think they're both really wonderful. And I will tell you, I am aware of this painting that's in our collection more than I ever have been, because it is not high on a wall and it's so beautifully lit that I really had a whole different experience of it. So please go and see that one. And then this one with a similar fiery subject is really complicated as well. And I want to again acknowledge Dr. Sylvain Cordier and the eye that he has for detail and his memory of all the paintings that he's seen, because he has unpacked some really fabulous things in this painting. So here again, The Eruption of Vesuvius. And I'll say that for much of his life, Volaire made his entire living doing nothing but painting the eruption of Vesuvius. You could do that in those days. It was that interesting to people. So, and Volaire actually was an assistant to Claude Vernet, Claude Joseph Vernet, for many, many years, about 7 years. And so I thought it was wonderful that we have this great example of Vernet's paintings in our collection as well. But he left for Volaire leaves for Italy in 1763, remaining in Rome until 1767. And he achieved great success as a landscape painter. And he did this Capriccio while he was there. Now, a Capriccio is an imaginary scene that often brings together real settings, but puts them all together in one painting. So that probably this structure here was probably inspired by the Temple of Romulus, this by Trajan's Column, and this was probably inspired by the Temple of Saturn in the Forum, and the port of the Ripa Grande, the arsenal constructed between 1714 and 15 here. And this work was painted just a year before he moved to Naples. So it was probably one of the last ones that he painted while he was still in Rome. And he was able to travel to Naples in 1767 to see the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. And I think it's really interesting that Naples was their ability to invite tourists to come and spend money in Naples was very developed, because they sent out invitations saying, we think Mount Vesuvius is going to erupt soon. You should all come to Naples so you can see it, which I think was neat. But what Sylvain also noticed, and I think I have more images of that here. You can see this is the view of the port of Ripa Grande. You can see it there. A little bit of a close-up so you can see that better there. And then a photograph of the port taken before 1876. And then this is the Temple of Romulus, so you can kind of see that connection there. Trajan's Column and the Temple of Saturn that you can see on fire up there in the corner. Now, Sylvain also believed that this may have been a statement about Pope Clement XIII and the downturn in the economy that was happening in Rome at the time, so that he was likely trying to make a connection between the fire that's raging there and Rome burning while Nero fiddled. Of course, that's probably didn't happen. He wasn't even in Rome at the time, but that idea that the person in charge should be taking care of the city better than they did. So, and the fire that was in Rome burned for 9 days and 2/3 of Rome was destroyed. So it was really catastrophic. And there's this painting of that by Hubert Robert, who we also have works by him, and their works in the Saunders collection. So I thought that was a really nice sort of connection with the burning of Rome. So during the economic crisis, the gulf between the wealthy and the working poor widened. And you can see that all of these figures escaping the fire are in 18th century dress. Sylvain actually noticed similarities between this fresco that's in the Vatican Museum today, the fire in the Borgo. And if you are not a member at either the Friends level or supporters level or higher, I highly urge you to do that, because I got to hear Sylvain talking about this and showing us the connections between these paintings. So that was part of a presentation called Cocktails with the Curator. And I found it so compelling that I asked him if I could please use some of the screenshots from his presentation, and he generously allowed me to do that. So here you can see this woman with her arms raised, and here from the fire in the Borgo, which is again about another fire that was happening that the Pope was able to put out through prayer. And then here's the gentleman carrying someone on his back, and then the woman with the urn on her head here, over here. So I think that's really kind of interesting that he was picking up on all of these things. And then he was thinking about this gentleman holding his head, and he was thinking that it might be from Michelangelo's Last Judgment. But then he found this other picture and felt like both of those might have been part of the inspiration of Volaire's inspiration in this detail. And then finally, there are all of these figures with, and I think I've got a picture, a better close-up of that, these figures with one figure raised who's being cheered as he's sort of leaving. Elevated figure surrounded by guards passes under the monumental gate to the left. Well, what he was thinking is this might well be sort of a reference to Christ's entrance in Jerusalem, but in this particular painting, Christ is not coming into Jerusalem, he's leaving. So again, probably a criticism of the Pope at that time. And then finally, this grouping over beyond the trees to the left that Sylvain thinks may be a connection with the flight into Egypt. And I think, yeah, he gave, I think I did not do the image of that, but there he had an image of kind of comparing that as well. And also he thought that it might, because of all of these references, be a commission. So he has promised to do much more research about this. And I believe that he envisions maybe even a 2-volume catalog on this whole collection that has given him so much delight to work with. And so here we have Volaire. The next year he moves to Naples, and you see the eruption of Vesuvius, which was quite the event for all of the people on the Grand Tour of that age. And I just think this is marvelous. So I wanted to also point out that these capriccios, we have a number of suggestions. What I love is that all of these make wonderful connections with works that are on view in our Marble Hall as well. So here again is Panini putting together one of these paintings that probably would have been sold to tourists on the Grand Tour, but the Colosseum, the Arch of Constantine, the Borghese Warrior, and the Dying Gaul are not all in the same place. And I believe actually this is a very famous mosaic as well, but it's the memory of all of these things that the person on the Grand Tour would want to take back with them, which I think is kind of cool. And here's the finding of Laocoon by Hubert Robert, who is also in our collection. And there's also another of his in the Saunders collection. So I think that's really wonderful. And he was often called Robert des Ruines, Robert of the Ruins, because he was so famed for doing ruins. And by the way, this is not where they found Laocoon. It was actually in a garden. So this is another sort of made up scene. And then it's really interesting that that painting actually belonged to the Comte de Vaudreuil. So just please go and see this magnificent collection as it has been installed. It is beautiful. You will be happy that you've gone. And it will make you see many of the paintings that are in our collection in a new way. And I challenge you to go and find out about this rhinoceros, because we know her name was Clara, and she was very famous throughout Europe. So go and find out about Clara. And that's really what I have for you.
I can't believe you're going to leave us with that cliffhanger, the Clara cliffhanger, Twyla.
Are lots
Like you
of
said,
videos about Clara on YouTube, so you can find
okay.
all of it. She's famous.
Good. I had a question of my own, actually. The paintings, you said, they've kind of constructed them. They've created these compositions from things that are real that they've seen and witnessed. My question is about the scale of these works. You mentioned that they would have been sold on the Grand Tour, people who were visiting and maybe taking home mementos. And I think of a postcard, but these are very large pictures. So was anything scaled down to maybe appeal to someone looking for a different price point, or was everything kind of this large nature and really for a clientele who could afford it?
Well, there are two that are actually in the Grand Tour room that are smaller.
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know, I don't know the dimensions, but quite a bit smaller than these. Something that you could, have put in a satchel quite easily.
Mm-hmm.
And they're capriccios as well, just sort of little sketches of ruins by Guardi. So yes, I think there were probably, now I think that if you did not have some money, you would not be on the Grand Tour to begin with.
True.
But probably there was something for just about everyone. It's interesting, the Boilly paintings, he probably painted over 4,000 portraits, and he could do them in an afternoon. So I think they were probably pretty affordable, but he was able to really make a great living at doing that.
Wow.
And through the prints as well.
Wow, that's amazing. And then something that you just talked about a little bit, this idea of the art as a political commentary. I find that fascinating. Do you think that was more maybe the commissioner wanting that, or is that also the artist's intent and belief? I mean, is there a feeling of maybe ostracizing yourself in the political sphere if you do go too hard against the Pope, I guess is my question.
I think that's why Sylvain wants to do more investigation on this one, because I don't think, I certainly don't know, but I don't think that that theme is reflected in other paintings. I could be wrong, but most of what I've seen are paintings of Vesuvius erupting. So I don't think there's much going on there, but there are other really interesting paintings in the Saunders collection that do that. There's one by De Haim of, gosh, I can't, it's a still life with flowers and a bird and a little orange. And that is a tribute to William of Orange, William III, who was a stadtholder of the Dutch, but also became King of England with Queen Mary. And the orange, of course, is the House of Orange. There's a little goldfinch beside him that's a sort of a symbol of the risen Christ, which is him bringing kind of bringing the Protestant areas of the Netherlands together again, and they're freed from the Spanish finally. So, and the tulips that are symbols of the Netherlands, there's a sunflower that kind of follows the sun, and thinking of William II or William III as the sun. So there's some other really great examples of that as well.
Wow.
And probably you would depending on where you lived, you would be very smart about what you were painting.
Right. Who you were in favor with.
This was always really interesting.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Twyla. I really appreciate your time and taking us through this exciting new installation. Someone asked on the in-person event that asked how long this would be available. And I don't think there's a finite end date. It's just when our expansion happens and we have to start closing down those galleries. So by no means should you sit on coming to see this installation in person, but I do think you have some time. So thank you again, Twyla, for this. And thank you to our viewers for joining in. And hopefully we'll see you next month at our June 3 and 30, which will be connecting to the Saran Sherpa Spirit Special Exhibition. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.